She was 22 years old, blonde, blue-eyed, described by survivors as hauntingly beautiful, the kind of face you'd see on a movie poster, not a war crimes indictment. But the women of Auschwitz-Birkenau didn't see beauty when Irma Grese walked through the gate. They saw their worst nightmare in human form. They called her the Hyena of Auschwitz. They called her the beautiful beast. And when she finally moved to Bergen-Belsen, they gave her a third name, the Beast of Belsen. This is the true, documented story of a woman who chose cruelty not out of fear, not out of orders alone, but because she enjoyed it. This is the story of how she rose, how she fell, and how on a cold December morning in 1945, justice finally arrived. One final step at a time, up the gallows. If you're new here at War Heroes Time Tales, this channel exists to make sure history like this is never forgotten. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because the stories we tell here are the ones that need to be told. Let's get into it. April 15, 1945, southwest of Germany. British soldiers from the 11th Armored Division push through the tree line and stop dead in their tracks. What they find at Bergen-Belsen concentration camp will haunt them for the rest of their lives. Over 13, none unburied corpses scattered across the grounds. Nearly 60,000 survivors, barely alive, ravaged by starvation and disease. Typhus and tuberculosis would continue killing thousands even after liberation. Veteran soldiers, men who had fought across North Africa and through the bloodiest battles of Western Europe, broke down and wept. British commanders immediately rounded up every SS guard still on the premises and forced them to bury the dead with their bare hands. Among those captured was a young woman who stood out even among monsters. Her name was Irma Grese. Irma Ida Ilse Grese was born on October 7, 1923, in the small town of Recken, in the Weimar Republic, the fragile German democracy that would collapse just 10 years later under the weight of Hitler's rise. She was the third of 5 children. Both parents worked as dairy laborers. Life was modest, unremarkable, until it wasn't. In January 1933, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party seized power. What followed was one of the most sophisticated propaganda campaigns in modern history. The Nazis weaponized schools, youth organizations, newspapers, and radio to reshape German identity from the ground up. Classrooms replaced standard textbooks with materials teaching children to worship Hitler, embrace militarism, and view Jewish people and other minorities as subhuman threats. Irma's father, Alfred Grese, was a devout Christian who openly despised the Nazis. He refused to let his children join the Hitler Youth or the League of German Girls. But Alfred couldn't stop what was happening in the classrooms. Every school day, Irma sat beneath a portrait of Adolf Hitler, absorbing an ideology built on hatred. Then, in 1936, tragedy struck the Grese household in the worst possible way. Irma's mother discovered her husband was having an affair with the daughter of a local pub owner. Unable to bear the betrayal, she took her own life. Irma was 13 years old. Alfred became the sole parent, strict, cold, and according to family accounts, physically violent with his children. Irma struggled academically, was reportedly bullied badly at school, and dropped out at 14. She drifted 6 months working on a farm, another 6 months in a retail shop in Leichen. Then at 15, she took a job as an assistant nurse at the Hohenlichen Sanatorium. Here she worked under Dr. Karl Gebhardt, a man who would later be convicted of war crimes for conducting medical experiments on living prisoners. How much Irma understood about Gebhardt's darker work at this stage remains disputed by historians. But the connection was there, and it would matter later. When she failed to qualify academically for full nursing credentials, the system redirected her. In 1941, at 17 years old, she was sent to operate a butter machine at a dairy farm. Her ambitions had hit a wall. Then the SS came calling. In July 1942, Irma Grese arrived at Ravensbrück, the only major Nazi concentration camp built exclusively for women. Since opening in May 1939, Ravensbrück had processed over 132,000 women from across occupied Europe. Polish resistance fighters, Russian prisoners, Jewish women, Romani people. Of those 132,000, more than 92,000 never left. The camp was staffed by SS men and approximately 150 female supervisors, some ideological volunteers, others drawn in by the promise of good pay and housing. Ravensbrück also served as a formal training ground for female SS guards, producing roughly 500 women who would go on to staff camps across the Reich. Their instructor was Dorothea Binz, a guard whose sadism was so extreme it became the standard they were taught to emulate. The message delivered to every trainee was simple. Prisoners exist to work until they die. Your job is to extract maximum labor from them while they're still breathing. Meanwhile, Dr. Gebhardt, Irma's former supervisor at Hohenlichen, was overseeing grotesque medical experiments on prisoners here. Female inmates, predominantly Polish, had their legs deliberately broken with hammers. Wounds were infected with aggressive bacteria. Experiments were conducted without anesthesia. Sterilization procedures were performed on women and children. Forced abortions were carried out on women 7 and 8 months pregnant. Newborns were killed. Survivor testimonies and post-war tribunal records indicate that Grese, then 18, assisted as a nurse during some of these procedures. Whether she was a willing participant or slowly desensitized by exposure to systematic brutality, the end result was the same. When she came home on leave in 1943 and told her father what she was doing at Ravensbrück, Alfred Grese took a belt to her and ordered her never to return to his house again. She didn't. In March 1943, Irma Grese was transferred to Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest and most lethal killing complex in human history. Birkenau alone held tens of thousands of prisoners divided across 10 sections separated by electrified barbed wire fencing. It functioned simultaneously as a forced labor camp, a transit hub, and a systematic extermination center. Between 1942 and 1944, approximately 1 million people were murdered here, the overwhelming majority of them Jewish. It was at Auschwitz that Irma Grese finally found what she had been missing her entire life: power over people who couldn't fight back. According to her sister Helene, as a little girl, Irma was timid, the kind of child who ran away from confrontation. Auschwitz gave her the opposite of that. Here she could strike, and no one could strike back. And survivor after survivor testified to the same devastating conclusion: she loved it. She became known for her woven leather whip, coated in cellophane so blood could be wiped off cleanly. She stationed herself at the camp gate during prisoner roll calls, which began at 3 a.m. and could last until 9 a.m., and beat inmates simply to pass the time. She ordered prisoners to hold large stones above their heads during these roll calls, and if their arms fell from exhaustion, she beat them for that too. Camp Commandant Joseph Kramer personally told her to stop using the whip. She ignored him and kept using it anyway. Dr. Gisela Perl, a prisoner physician who survived Auschwitz, later described Grese in stunning, chilling terms. She was one of the most beautiful women I have ever seen. Her body was perfect in every line, her face clear and angelic, her blue eyes the gayest, most innocent eyes one can imagine, and yet Irma Grese was the most depraved, cruel, imaginative pervert I ever came across. Survivor Olga Lengyel, in her memoir 5 Chimneys, documented how Grese participated in the selections. The brutal process of determining which prisoners would be sent to the gas chambers. Lengyel wrote that Grese deliberately targeted beautiful women out of jealousy, marking them for death because of how they looked. When a Georgian prisoner refused her advances, she dragged his girlfriend naked through the camp by her hair, whipped her publicly, then had the man shot and the woman transferred to the camp brothel. In May 1944, Hungarian authorities, operating under Nazi orders, deported approximately 424 Jewish people from Hungary to Auschwitz-Birkenau in just 8 weeks. The majority were gassed within hours of arrival. Grese, now 20, was promoted to senior supervisor of Camp C, a section holding an estimated 30,000 prisoners, primarily Hungarian women, crammed into barracks designed for a fraction of that number. She also kept 2 large dogs, deliberately starved. When prisoner columns couldn't keep pace on forced marches, she unleashed them. One survivor's testimony from post-war proceedings described the aftermath of a collapsed prison wagon. Irma sicked the 2 police dogs on them. The dogs were tearing at the girls' bodies. Irma came closer to observe. Her eyes were bloodshot. The sight of blood seemed to intoxicate her. Witnesses said she was smiling. There is one documented act of humanity on her record. A 14-year-old prisoner named Alice Tenenbaum, who resembled Grese's sister Helene, was selected for the gas chamber by Josef Mengele 16 separate times. Each time, Grese entered the gas chamber and physically removed the girl, saving her life. After the war, Tenenbaum learned the reason. She looked like someone Irma actually loved. In January 1945, as Soviet forces closed in on Auschwitz, the SS began the infamous death marches, forcing surviving prisoners to walk hundreds of kilometers through freezing winter conditions. Those who collapsed were shot. Grese accompanied one such transport from Auschwitz to Ravensbrück and then onward to Bergen-Belsen, arriving in March 1945. Even as the Reich collapsed around her, Grese didn't stop. Prisoners at Bergen-Belsen were surviving on watery turnip soup and 3.5 centimeters of bread per day. The average daily death toll in March 1945 was between 250 and 300 people, and still Grese made prisoners kneel and hold stones. Still, she beat starving women with a rubber truncheon. Still, she forced exhausted prisoners to run, march, and do physical exercises until they collapsed. 2 weeks before British forces arrived, when the outcome of the war was obvious, She was seen beating a prisoner with a riding crop. On the eve of liberation, she knocked the heads of two sisters together when she caught them eating potato scraps from the kitchen garbage. She was captured on April 17, 1945, 2 days after liberation. When a British journalist asked her why she had done what she did, Grese answered without hesitation, "It was our duty to exterminate anti-social elements so that Germany's future would be assured." Not a trace of remorse, not a shadow of doubt. The Belsen trial opened on September 17, 1945. Survivor after survivor took the stand. Grese's defense was simple. She admitted to beatings but denied killing anyone. She accused the witnesses of exaggerating, of making, in her words, an elephant out of a small fly. The British military tribunal disagreed. On November 17, 1945, Irma Grese was sentenced to death by hanging. On December 13, 1945, British executioner Albert Pierrepoint led her to the gallows. She was 22 years old. Walking to her execution, she spoke only one word, Schnell. Quickly, Irma Grese became the youngest woman executed under British law in the 20th century. She had once told prisoners she would be a movie star after the war. She had imagined her name on a screen. History put her name somewhere else entirely. There were no tears shed for Irma Grese, and history has made its judgment clear. Stories like this exist so that we never forget the depths human beings are capable of sinking to, and why the world must never allow it to happen again. If this documentary moved you, challenged you, or taught you something, subscribe to War Heroes Time Tales right now. Hit the like button, share this with someone who needs to know this history, and turn on notifications so you never miss what we uncover next. We'll see you in the next chapter of history.